I've never been able to master the art of mimicry, but my husband, he does it brilliantly. He can do all the voices.
King Charles utters a single word. A valet is already in motion, standing by with a toothbrush, already preloaded with exactly 1 inch of toothpaste. Not more, not less. This isn't a rumor whispered by tabloids. It's a verified habit, ingrained. Since his earliest childhood, when royal discipline disguised itself as care, it's not about laziness or arrogance. It's about control over chaos, over time, over the relentless demands of monarchy. Every single morning begins not with a choice, but with a command of ritual. And that ritual, it doesn't end at the sink. Because right after that inch of toothpaste has been administered, the quiet war for perfection continues. His shoelaces? Yes, shoelaces aren't just tied. They're ironed, each loop pressed flat like a military crease. His pajamas? Pressed too, every day, not for show, but for comfort. Because for King Charles, even rest must follow order. The bath plug must be positioned in the same direction every single time. And the water cannot be too hot, nor too cold. Tepid, that's the word. Tepid water. A strange preference, perhaps. But to the king, it's peace. In that exact temperature, that silent bath, that symmetry of routine, he finds what most rulers search for in speeches or power balance. And none of it is random. Every quirk, every tiny step, is a tether to his past. This isn't just about eccentricity. It's about survival. As a child raised in a golden cage, where even his tears had consequences, routine became the only constant. And as the decades passed, that need for familiarity only grew stronger. Every royal obligation, every public glare, every scandal he endured, they all melted away for a moment each morning, when his world unfolded exactly as it should. 1 inch of toothpaste, tepid water, ironed laces. It was his rebellion against unpredictability, his quiet way of declaring, here, in this space, I am still in control. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. Because if you think the king's demand for structure ends at home, you're wrong. In fact, his need for control travels with him sometimes in the most shocking and extravagant ways. Whether he's crossing borders or simply visiting a friend's country estate, Charles doesn't leave behind his royal habits. He takes them with him, wrapped in velvet and sealed in protocol. Because while the world may see a monarch walking, with grace and composure behind the scenes, his devotion to personal comfort is far more complex and far more obsessive than most would dare to imagine. But what King Charles insists on bringing reveals a very different story. At the heart of his travel routine lies not extravagance, but obsession. Wherever he goes, whether it's a state visit or a weekend at a friend's estate, a curious list of personal items always arrives before him. At the top of that list, a custom-made toilet seat. Not metaphorically royal, literally his own. Installed before his arrival, sanitized, untouched by anyone else. Along with it comes a specific brand of toilet paper, Kleenex Velvet. Nothing else will do. And while the world may mock or marvel, to the king, it's not about luxury. It's about control over the uncontrollable. Because when your life is dictated by ceremonies, scripts, and centuries of tradition, even the smallest detail becomes sacred. But what truly raises eyebrows isn't a seat or some branded tissue. It's something far more intimate. Tucked into his travel luggage is a companion that's been with him since childhood, a small, worn teddy bear. To the outside world, it might appear juvenile, even absurd. But for Charles, this bear is not a toy. It's a relic, a keeper of secrets, a source of solace in rooms filled with strangers and obligations. And here's the twist. This bear doesn't just ride along. It is tended to, guarded with the seriousness of royal jewels. Cared for exclusively by his former nanny, this plush companion is cleaned, wrapped, and packed with the precision of a state gift. It's the kind of detail that makes headlines, but it hides something far deeper. The longing for something familiar in a world where everything else is scripted. And that desire for familiarity doesn't stop with emotional comfort. It spills into every corner of his luggage. Most people pack light for a quick visit. Not King Charles. Even for a 48-hour stay, he arrives with multiple changes of clothes per day, complete with designated bags for each item: ties, shoes, cufflinks, grooming kits, all separated, all prepared. It's not about being pampered, it's about building a portable version of the world he can control. Because while others see privilege, he sees a defense mechanism against chaos, against change, against loss. Every ironed collar, every folded sock represents a barrier between the man and the pressures pressing in from all sides. To make it all work, a full team travels ahead of him. They don't just arrange logistics, they build a sanctuary. Every curtain drawn the right way, every mattress replaced with his orthopedic one, every light bulb set to the temperature he prefers. It's an invisible machine built to maintain the illusion of consistency. But illusions, no matter how carefully constructed, always crack under pressure. And what they reveal is a man who is not obsessed with luxury, but terrified of unpredictability. Because, in his world, comfort isn't just a preference, it's survival. Each object, each ritual, each carefully packed item is a silent cry for stability, in a role that demands perfection and sacrifice. But even this complex choreography of comfort can't shield him from what's coming next. Because beyond the embroidered pajamas and polished shoes lies a different kind of habit. One that doesn't travel in bags or boxes. A ritual that begins with a simple wooden box at the breakfast table and tells us even more about who King Charles really is. For most people, breakfast is an afterthought toast, a quick cup of coffee, maybe nothing at all. But for King Charles, breakfast is not just a meal, it's a ceremony. A ritual of comfort, precision, and legacy, all packed neatly inside one object. The breakfast box. It's no ordinary box. Lined in leather, guarded with quiet intensity, and prepared with the same meticulousness as a royal banquet, this simple container holds the key to how the king begins each day. And what lies inside? A revelation. 6 different varieties of honey, each selected for a different purpose, a different mood. From Scottish heather to lavender-infused, each jar is a statement of taste, of memory, of identity. Alongside the honey sit custom-blended mueslis, an array of dried fruits, and slices of homemade bread that must be baked to precise standards. These are not luxuries, they are necessities in a life ruled by routine. And wherever he goes, whether it's a summit in Europe or a quiet visit to a countryside estate, the box goes with him. It arrives before he does, placed with care by his staff, ready and waiting. Because for King Charles, unpredictability is the enemy. And in the chaos of global diplomacy, relentless headlines, and palace intrigues, this box is his anchor. He doesn't begin his day until the exact same things are in place. The fruit must be fresh. The juice must be cold. The bread must be warm. If even one item is missing, the rhythm of the day risks falling apart. And while that might sound extreme, to some, to the king, it is a shield, a quiet, edible shield from the madness of public life. But beneath the surface of this finely tuned breakfast ritual lies something deeper, a personal code. King Charles has made it clear. Foie gras, once considered a royal delicacy, is banned from his table, not for taste, but for ethics. The method of force-feeding ducks or geese to produce it goes against every principle he holds about animal welfare. And so, in a world where kings are rarely told no, Charles told the world exactly what he wouldn't tolerate. It's a powerful act cloaked in a culinary choice, a small rebellion that echoes loudly through his carefully curated morning ritual. This is not a man who eats for indulgence. He eats with purpose, with values, with unwavering control. There's a reason breakfast is sacred to him. It's the only time in the day that still belongs solely to him. A moment before the world intrudes, before meetings, before ceremonies, before the weight of the crown settles onto his shoulders. In those few bites of muesli and honey, there is still the boy raised under relentless expectation, craving a moment of calm. There is still the man shaped by heartbreak, seeking nourishment for more than just his body. This box, this curated morning feast, isn't just about habit. It's about survival. And it tells us far more about King Charles than any speech or photograph ever could. But while his mornings unfold like a symphony of order and meaning, his afternoons take a far more unpredictable turn, because the next part of his royal routine doesn't involve food or luxury or even tradition. It involves absence. And what's missing from his midday hours might just be the strangest revelation of all. King Charles chooses to do something radical. He skips it. No lavish banquets. No silver-plated servings at high noon. Just a silent decision to press on through the day without stopping. While most would consider it unthinkable, even unhealthy for Charles, it's a calculated ritual, not an act of denial, but of control. It's not about appetite. It's about discipline. In the relentless rhythm of royal life diplomatic meetings, formal engagements, global scrutiny, he's found that skipping lunch grants him something rare. Momentum. One less interruption. One more hour to focus. It's the monarch's quiet, rebellion against excess, and perhaps against weakness. But this seemingly simple choice sends ripples far beyond the dining room. His staff, those who accompany him on tours, attend to him through state visits and long charity events, have learned to adjust. Lunch, for them, becomes an afterthought. Plans shift. Meals are delayed. Schedules are redrawn in real time. Because when the king doesn't eat, no one else dares to suggest otherwise. His habits shape the very architecture of royal operation. It may seem like a small preference, but it reveals something much larger. King Charles exerts quiet power not just with his title, but with his discipline. And while many see royalty as indulgent, this king chooses restraint where others might demand indulgence. Yet even the most disciplined routines eventually meet their limits. After years of skipping lunch, age and health have started to change the rules. Quietly, without fanfare, light lunches began reappearing on his schedule: half an avocado, a slice of toast, or something equally minimal. It's not defeat, it's adaptation. Because Charles has never treated his habits as immovable. Instead, they evolve with purpose. He bends them just enough to preserve his energy, his clarity, and above all, his legacy. This subtle shift in his midday ritual offers a rare glimpse into something the public rarely sees: vulnerability. Even kings must yield to time. Even kings must reconsider their rules. But what remains unwavering is his intent. By skipping lunch or controlling it with precision, he reminds the world that his duty comes first. That every choice, down to what's on his plate, is designed to optimize his role. While others take a break to refuel, he continues forward, one quiet sacrifice at a time. It's not just about food, it's about philosophy. He's chosen a life that rejects the convenient in favor of the purposeful. And in doing so, he's built a rhythm uniquely his own, one that values service above comfort and commitment above tradition. Yet food and fasting only scratch the surface. Beneath the tailored suits and structured routines lies a man not only driven by personal habits, but by profound beliefs. Because when the world expects him to stand for one faith, Charles surprises everyone by embracing many. And what comes next is not just a spiritual curiosity, it's a bold departure from royal convention that challenges the very foundation of the crown. In a monarchy rooted in centuries of religious tradition, King Charles chose to walk a path that defied expectation. While the crown he wears is bound to the Church of England, his heart reaches far beyond its pews. From the earliest days of his public life, it was clear Charles was not content to be a ceremonial figurehead of faith. He sought something deeper, something more inclusive. Where others saw division, he saw common threads. And in rooms filled with robes of every color and languages whispered in ancient prayers, Charles did the unthinkable for a British monarch. He listened, not to be polite, not for optics, but because he believed that truth was not confined to any one altar. Over the decades, he's met with imams, rabbis, Hindu scholars, Buddhist monks, and spiritual leaders of traditions most royals before him might have ignored. He didn't just shake hands, he asked questions. He spoke of common humanity. He embraced the teachings of peace, humility, and connection regardless of which scripture they came from. And in doing so, he stirred controversy within the rigid walls of the palace. Because when a future king declares that he sees himself not only as defender of the faith but as defender of faith, Full stop, it sends shockwaves through the establishment. It's not just semantics, it's revolution cloaked in diplomacy. But Charles didn't stop at private meetings or quiet gestures. He used his platform to echo what so many in silence had long hoped to hear. In public addresses, he urged the world to look past the labels that divide and recognize the values that unite. Respect, compassion, harmony. He spoke not like a ruler commanding loyalty, but like a bridge builder inviting reconciliation. These weren't safe speeches, they were statements of risk, because to suggest that a monarch should embrace all faiths was, for some, heresy. Yet for Charles, it was honesty. His spirituality was never limited to one temple or text. It was a lifelong search for understanding, born not of rebellion, but of conviction. And that conviction left a mark, not just on those who sat with him across tables and sanctuaries, but on the world watching him lead. In a time when division clings to headlines like dust to a crown, Charles's quiet insistence on unity offers something rare: hope. A hope that perhaps leadership doesn't have to mean exclusion. That power can coexist with empathy. That tradition can evolve without losing its soul. In his choice to honor many paths, he has not diminished the church, he has expanded the idea of what it means to serve under God. This is the spiritual legacy he continues to build, not by preaching, but by practicing. And what makes this even more powerful is that it doesn't end in the chapel. His respect for the harmony of life of body, spirit, and earth flows directly into the next, equally unexpected chapter of his beliefs. Because when it comes to healing, King Charles doesn't just turn to science, he turns to something older, something softer, something the modern world has tried to discredit, yet he has chosen to defend with unshakable resolve. King Charles has always looked elsewhere. While most turn to modern science in search of healing, he has consistently championed something far older and far more controversial: homeopathy. For decades, he has stood at the crossroads of science and skepticism, unapologetically endorsing natural remedies and alternative therapies, not as a fleeting interest, but as a personal creed. Long before it was fashionable, long before wellness became an industry, Charles believed in the body's ability to heal itself, given the right guidance, the right energy, and the right respect. He didn't whisper this belief, he declared it. And in doing so, he sparked a firestorm. This wasn't just about personal preference, it was about institutional change. In the late 1990s, Charles helped launch the Foundation for Integrated Health, a bold initiative aimed at bringing complementary medicine into the spotlight. The goal? To unite conventional and alternative practices, giving patients a broader spectrum of care. But almost immediately, it faced backlash. Critics labeled it pseudoscience. The medical establishment bristled, and when the foundation later collapsed under the weight of financial scrutiny and fraud allegations not directly tied to Charles, but deeply damaging. Nonetheless, it handed his opponents the ammunition they'd been waiting for. The press went for blood. Scientists rolled their eyes. And yet, Charles never flinched. He stood firm. Because for him, this wasn't about pleasing the public. It was about following conviction. His belief in alternative medicine isn't political. It's deeply personal, rooted in his lifelong desire to treat the body as a whole, not a machine of symptoms to be patched and replaced. He's spoken openly about the value of herbal remedies, acupuncture, aromatherapy methods often dismissed by conventional doctors but revered in ancient traditions. To Charles, healing is not just physical, it's spiritual, emotional, environmental. He doesn't believe that medicine should be limited to what's sold behind pharmacy counters. He believes healing can come from the earth, from ritual, from respect for energies we still don't fully understand. And that belief, despite the mockery it invites, remains unshaken. But it hasn't come without a cost. His vocal stance has drawn ire from medical professionals across the UK. It's been labeled irresponsible, dangerous, a distraction from evidence-based care. Yet, in the shadows of criticism, Charles has succeeded in something few expected. He's made the conversation unavoidable. He's forced a country steeped in traditional medicine to confront alternative approaches. He's elevated fringe ideas into mainstream dialogue. And in doing so, he's brought hope to countless patients left behind by modern systems that treat diseases, not people. Because at its core, this isn't just about homeopathy. It's about choice, about agency, about the right to believe in something different when everything else has failed. And in that belief, King Charles has become more than a monarch. He's become a symbol of resistance to the clinical coldness of modern healthcare and of a softer, more human way to heal. Yet for all his sweeping philosophies and unconventional remedies, there's a different kind of ritual that reveals just as much about who he is. A moment not of medicine, but of taste. Because when the king sits for tea, or something far more specific, every ingredient, every temperature, every flavor tells a story. And the next chapter? It's surprisingly delicious and undeniably peculiar. But for King Charles, this daily ritual is more than a quaint British custom, it's an exact science. One that demands precision, reverence, and most of all, consistency. Because while millions casually drop a tea bag into a mug and call it a break, Charles would see that as sacrilege. He doesn't sip just any tea. His is brewed from loose leaf, steeped with care in a proper pot. Never rushed, never improvised. The temperature must be exact. The aroma must rise just so. And if it's served too weak, too strong, or, God forbid, from a bag, it's quietly rejected. Not with anger, but with the silent disappointment of a man who's built his life on the elegance of order. But tea is only half of this royal indulgence. The other half? A plate of cheese and biscuits. Simple, perhaps, but only on the surface. Because just like everything else in King Charles's world, there are rules. The cheese must be served at room temperature, but not just any room. The room he's in. The biscuits, warmed to perfection. And the timing? Never before the main course. Only after. Only when it feels right. Staff are trained not to guess, but to know. To anticipate. To read the quiet cues that signal it's time. There are no shortcuts here. No compromises. And while some may scoff at the idea of warming cheese or setting biscuit trays with military precision, to Charles, it's a small expression of something larger. Control. In a world where so little is truly his, this moment, this tea, this plate, is an act of self-assertion. These culinary quirks might seem eccentric, even humorous, but they reveal something far more profound than a preference for camembert. They reflect a man who values ritual in a life where nothing is ordinary. Tea and cheese become symbols of stillness in the storm, anchors in the ever-shifting tides of public life. While others may measure their worth in titles or power, Charles finds comfort in detail, in repetition, in the familiar. And this insistence on tradition isn't about stubbornness, it's about identity. It's how he preserves the parts of himself that fame and duty can't consume. More than that, it's cultural. Afternoon tea isn't just food, it's ceremony. A marker of British identity. But in Charles's hands, it's elevated beyond etiquette. It becomes art, a curated experience, a dance between taste and memory. And in the space between sips and bites, we find a portrait of the king not as a ruler, but as a man who finds peace in the tiniest of rituals. Because while the world expects him to lead nations, sometimes what he craves is far simpler. A well-brewed cup of tea, a biscuit served just right, and a moment to exhale. Yet even in these quiet pauses, Charles remains a creature of expression, always yearning to connect, to create, to preserve. And as the clink of teacups fades and the last crumbs are cleared, another side of the king quietly steps forward. Not the monarch, not the husband, but the artist. Because what comes next reveals not just his habits, but his soul painted in brush strokes and preserved in stone. King Charles has always searched for something that was entirely his, and he found it in silence, in stillness, in the sweep of a paintbrush across canvas. Long before he wore the crown, before duty consumed every hour of his life, Charles was a painter. Not for praise or prestige, but for escape. Landscapes became his sanctuary. Seascapes, his confession. Each brushstroke told a story the public would never hear. And unlike speeches written by advisors or ceremonies designed by tradition, his paintings came from a place untouched by power, a place of vulnerability. He painted not as a prince, but as a man trying to make sense of the world around him. A man who needed to capture fleeting beauty before it was swallowed by responsibility. But it wasn't just nature that stirred his soul. It was structure, form, symmetry. Architecture, to Charles, wasn't merely about buildings, it was about identity. And he wasn't afraid to say it. When modern architects unveiled bold, glass-heavy designs that defied historical context, he didn't politely applaud. He condemned, publicly, famously. And when he called a proposed extension to the National Gallery a monstrous carbuncle, the establishment recoiled. But the message was clear: he would not stand by while history was erased in the name of innovation. He saw concrete towers not as progress, but as scars on a cultural legacy. His vision was unapologetically classical. He wanted spires, not slabs, arches, not angles, and he fought for them, even when his critics labeled him out of touch. Yet, those very critics underestimated him. Because his influence didn't end with opinion, it reshaped skylines. Developers paused. Plans changed. Projects were reimagined. Whether they liked it or not, the voice of the future king carried weight. And through it, he carved his own path, one that refused to separate beauty from purpose. He believed buildings should speak to the people, not tower over them. That architecture should invite, not intimidate. And in that belief, Charles became more than a royal with a paintbrush. He became a cultural force, unafraid to challenge the modern world's obsession with the new. His love for painting and his crusade for architectural preservation are not just hobbies, they are revelations. They reveal a man who sees beyond the surface, a man who understands that culture is not preserved through ceremony alone, but through creation, through bold defense, through an unshakable reverence for detail. In every canvas that hangs quietly in a royal residence, in every restored column or protected skyline, there is a trace of Charles that history will not overlook. Not because it was demanded, but because it was earned. And so, as the crown now sits upon his head, it rests not on a figurehead, but on a creator, a critic. A man whose habits, however peculiar, tell a far more human story than headlines ever could. Because behind every brushstroke and every whispered architectural protest lies a deeper truth. King Charles has spent a lifetime shaping not only the world he inherited, but the world he will leave behind. One detail, one tradition, one deeply personal habit at a time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.